Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So this particular episode, I'm going to revisit Daria. And this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus in on fan theories. I think that fan theories are an interesting take to give more perspective about the show and in the realms of reality of making sense of what could possibly happen if these were real situations and people who enjoy the aspects of the show, what they think and their perspectives. It's quite interesting how that gives the more of an analysis of things of, for instance, with movies, they label those as plot holes and things like that. All right, so let's dive in. All right, Daria. So, also to add on to the musical aspect of Daria, and then in Beavis and Butthead, particularly with Beavis and Butthead, but I'm going to go, of course, focus all the attention towards Daria because that's what the show is about. But both of the shows centered around music too, as a way, another means, another platform of talking about the relevance of music and in youth and culture. So, for instance, in Beavis and Butthead, you would cut into them seeing rock stars or heavy metal stars and then talking about them and giving an analysis about the stars. For instance, Henry Rollins, a really good guy, really good music. I don't know him, but as far as his music is really good, that's what I mean by a really good guy. Is just really, he puts his all in his music, and particularly the way that he presented metal and rock and all of those things. And then when he was in Johnny Mnemonic, he did a really good job with that. So, as a versatile that he's more than, a frontman for musician for his band, and getting to depth about the aspect of everything else with acting and how that interlaces with how he performs is quite interesting too with that. And so going on to Daria, where they would cut into commercial breaks for showing a flash in the background, sort of like montages of the show, and then you get all these different up-and-coming artists, particularly for different eras that relate to the show's topic. And also, that's one theory that I'm going to touch on even more so, but I'm just going to give you a preview about it too. So there's a fan theory that states that the particular theme song is, something like that, but I'm going to go into more detail, that it is music that is particularly stuck in her head at the time. And so that's also going into the analysis of these fan theories, particularly that's a popular fan theory of going in dismantling or debunking or breaking down the aspects of the mental well-being of the main characters. So with Daria, it was particularly interesting to me because particularly growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, it gave the witty and the mixed witty and dark humor together to where it, to me, worked well with giving a glimpse into the aspect of the teenage psyche. And then also a glimpse into the aspect of the 90s, and particularly with the elements of hot button issues that the youth culture would be centered around at that time. And so, for instance, the aspect of college, and is that really worth all the hype about it, to the analysis of that, and then versus quoting, there is a quote, a meme about this too, with the Daria saying that, why should we have a life that center our whole lives on the decisions that we make as teenagers. It's quite an in-depth analysis about the aspects of how people change their minds as they get older and are not quite developed. So at that age, so how can you expect you to have a healthy relationship with, as for the aspect of career-wise, of how people see themselves, and that also points to another element into the aspects, which is a real thing with disgruntled workers, and the aspects of having that and work culture, hating your job, just doing it just to get paid or not really feeling fulfilled. And all of these elements interlace also add to the aspects of fan theories too. All right, enough said. Fixing to get ready to break everything down with these fan theories. All right, and the sources that are provided for this episode will be linked for you too. Okay, so the first thing that I'm reading from is TV tropes, and it's Daria, and it's entitled WMG Fan Theories. So it goes into DiMartino served in the Vietnam War. So those of you who know and those of you who don't know, DiMartino is one of, I think he's the history teacher. And it is prevalent throughout his character that he is a war veteran. And then, so, he does have flashes which would be alluding that he has PTSD, and he goes back and he talks about, and it's innate, and, you see all these different things. And I think it's also in order to give a backstory about his character and how he came to the state that he is today. But it doesn't help when, for instance, characters like Kevin and Brittany misreference important moments in history. So it says, implied by his dialogue in the first episode, when he is teaching a lesson on Vietnam, his admitted military background, entitled the episode that is entitled The Daria Hunter, and it has possible signs of PTSD. So it goes on to say about the fan theory, he actually wasn't teaching a lesson on Vietnam, though he did mention his respect for those who died in it. He mentioned this due to Kevin mixing up the Mexican and Vietnam wars. But that just adds further fuel to this theory, since it means he wasn't teaching it just to meet standards, but rather pointing out said retrospects about his own violation. And this next fan theory is quite interesting. So to add on to it, all right, so I was talking about this too with my husband, and he was also giving his observations about everything. And then I noticed that too. So, okay, when you look at the show Beavis and Butthead, Daria does appear. But it seems as if that's an aftermath of Daria when she's in college. And it seems like Beavis and Butthead aren't actually in high school. They're actually in college, particularly a community college. And so this raises the question about what all happened as the aftermath when Daria graduated from high school. You know, why is she at a community college? Is she at a community college because she couldn't make the grades in an Ivy League school that she was in, and then she's, you know, causing face and saving the embarrassment and not letting people know where she is by, you know, going to a community college and making up the time and then going re-enrolling into the Ivy League school that she got kicked out for academic probation or so? Or is it a whole thing where the parents split up and she wanted to stay with her dad and she's trying to help all of that as a rebounding too? Because these are thoughts that my husband was talking about and addressing and seeing. And then also, you know, me too, pointing out that that's strange that, you know, she's not in an Ivy League school, you know. And then also the aspect of Beavis and Butthead, where it's making it seem like they're in high school, but they're not in college. Like, what all of those interlating to? What are all of those pulling towards? What kind of plot hole is that? So this goes on to say, Beavis and Butthead does not exist in Daria's universe spinoff. A very plausible theory was it was very curious that though out of the series, and also is another thing to add on to this. So I did make an episode about Daria, and I mainly focused in on the facts and how the producers and everything from MTV, how all of it was created and made. And so there was a thing that was noted, as I was finding all the research out, that the creators from Daria didn't necessarily, initially honestly, they didn't want him. Now, it's not initially because that's the wrong word choice here. That's the way it seems with the research that I found, that they didn't want Mike Chud and the creative flow of Daria. The creators wanted to break out and do something on their own, and they didn't want his hand in it. So maybe that's a thing too, why Daria isn't necessarily part of that universe of Beavis and Butthead and it's its own entity. Who knows? But this fan theory that I'm about to read is quite interesting too, to add on to another element. So it's a very plausible theory, as it is very curious that throughout the series, Daria never mentioned the duo. Interestingly, Quinn never appeared in Beavis and Butthead either. But what really makes it even more plausible theory is that Daria actually had some plot progression, and the show even ended with Daria and her friends splitting up, going off to college. Meanwhile, Beavis and Butthead had been in the same grade with the same teacher and classmates for well over 20 years at that point. So it's not 100% confirmed, but the theory has become increasingly solid now with the release of Beavis and Butthead to the universe where it was revealed. So the Daria Morgendorffer of this show could very well exist in her own alternate universe where Beavis and Butthead might not have existed or existed, but far less interactions with Daria to really make it a big impact on her life. If Daria's if Daria's spinoff exists in the same universe of Beavis and Butthead, Upchuck is related to Beavis and Butthead. So it goes on to say these three youngsters have extremely similar characteristics such as physical appearance, nose, and the Casanova wannabe persona. Upchuck may be the cousin of either of these two. The only difference is that compared to Beavis and Butthead, Upchuck is a genius. Trent had feelings for Daria, but though she was too good for him. Trent clearly had a high opinion of Daria. He also was very insecure about his own career choices and his future. He didn't really have the maturity to handle it, so he acted like he was ignorant of her feelings, not realizing that it would hurt her. So the breakup scene doesn't support this. Both Daria and Trent seem aware of the double meaning. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. So let me go back. So I'm talking about let me rephrase this all over again. So Trent, because when you read it, it looks like it's bleeding into Upchuck. No, this is a separate fan theory. So Trent is Jane's older brother, and so this is a fan theory that is in realms of explaining the dynamic between Daria and Trent. So Trent clearly had a high opinion of Daria. He was also very insecure about his own career choices and his future. He didn't, and you see that prevalent too. How he keeps saying he wants to be a musician and he wants to live his life the way he wants to and then pursue these goals, but yet at the same time he has some doubt about it. And so she goes in to reassure him in the show that, at least you can say that you live your life by trying the things that you actually want to do, and that's bold to do. Of course I'm paraphrasing. So he was also very insecure about his own career choices and his future. He didn't really have the maturity to handle it, so he acted like he was ignorant of her feelings, not realizing that it would hurt her. So the breakup, in this scene, it doesn't support this. Both Daria and Trent seem aware of the double meaning of their conversation about why they shouldn't have agreed to cooperate on a school project. It goes to say with this quote, "I guess it was a bad idea for us to get together for this." In the end, once Daria has clearly gotten over Trent, he gives her a peck on the cheek, something he never did while she had a crush on him. All right, so as I mentioned before in my opening thoughts, so this is a fan theory that states this. The music that's playing in the background of the original version of each episode is the music Daria had stuck in her head at the time. So this is the note of it. So the music was almost completely rewritten for the DVD release. So this does not apply to that, though the songs on the DVDs reflect the spirit of the originals. So maybe the theory can still work for them. Daria on MTV Production used songs that were recent at the time of airing as background music. All right, next fan theory says, the entire series is written by Daria herself. It would explain why Brittany and Kevin are so dumb. Miss Lee is so evil and bureaucratic. And I'll go into the aspect too. There is a Wikipedia wiki that goes into the aspect of the dynamic between the political ideologies of these characters, and particularly with Daria. Alright, so why Helen and Jake are so embarrassing, why Quinn is the way that she is, etc. It also explains why character development kicked in most of the major characters as the years progressed, except Kevin, of course. As Daria became more willing to look into their actual personalities and not just write them off as one-dimensional characters. However, if Daria was writing them, the popular people wouldn't be popular. Or it could just be her interpretation of the events after the fact. She might exaggerate things to fit her own interpretation, but she wouldn't outright change the outcome. She's not writing a fictional fix it about her life, but a recording of the events from her own point of view. Some of these mistakes Daria makes are very difficult to realize without remembering the exact details of what happened, ergo occasionally mistaking Brittany and Kevin's stupidity for malice. Alright, so this next fan theory goes into saying the episode Depth Takes a Holiday is a daydream of Daria's. It's basically a bizarre daydream that Daria is having. The holiday spirits are also part of her wish fulfillment for people who might actually appreciate her. This is helped by the fact that they say that she is cool and the only one who can help her is him. And it just also goes into the perspective about this fan theory of Daria's mental state, particularly does Daria actually have a mental illness? And then the whole running joke, particularly about her room, how it's all padded. So, what does that allude to? Is it just a defense mechanism of her making jokes that that's actually because of her, or, what's going on with that? All right, so I don't know about these fan theories here with Sandy, and then again, it goes with Quinn and all of that. So the aspects of Sandy being transgender and Quinn being transgender. So I think that this person who created these fan theories or what have you, or if it's a multitude of people, are missing the point of the aspect of personas of the 90s. So it was either a thing where women, particularly young women and girls, teenage girls, that is, having the trait of being a strong woman where you don't inflect your voice, that you just kind of monotone. And I think Sandy embodies that aspect. I don't think there's a transgender deal going on. And then on the polar opposite of that, on the extreme of Quinn, being very girly, very bubbly and things like that. Those are, they were common personality traits that you would see a lot of times in popular music, movies, etc. in the 90s. So I think they're making commentary about that. So it says, thus her deep voice, highly aggressive attitude, and extreme bitterness and resentment towards Quinn, the beautiful teenage girl she wants to be. That would make her sympathetic. So it goes on to say you can't go on the drugs and have the surgery that allow that until you're through puberty. So if she is a trans woman, how does she hide her, parts? And it goes on to say, actually, there are plenty of trans women who transition before puberty. And then it says the whole thing about sacrificing to make for fashion and all these things. And it says, but considering the sorts of outfits seen on drag queens or on adult men that are fully developed in certain areas. So Sandy being able to tuck is not out of the question. And she could do this in another room when she needs to change. If at least some of her facial features could be considered too masculine, even with the kind of makeup the Fashion Club wears, there are probably special makeup techniques she could do in addition. So again, I think this is just really far-fetched too. And then, it's just a shame that in the times that we live in, this is prevalent. I think where it's prevalent, it's, we gotta see things for what it is, that this is pushed as a normal thing. Transgender, sex changes and all that is fine to do while you're in puberty or before puberty. And actually, no, it's not fine. That's child abuse, really. And you got to talk to the kid and, work with them. And then when they are an adult, then they want to still do that. Okay, they're an adult. But, hey, again, that's the whole thing with the moral compass. You got to think about the benefit of the children. So, I think that with these fan theories, that's what it's traced in on, looking at things from this century's, well, not century, but this era's point of view. So, it also says with Quinn, with her male to female transgender deal, it says Quinn's issues resolving around her pores and cheese on pizza are because of that way that she interacts with her hormones and testosterone blockers. This is one instance of this fan theory. So, and then it also alludes to the aspects of this too, with Jane and Daria not actually being friends, ? They might be lovers too. And that's quite interesting. But, that happens too a lot with the aspect of two females being so close like that. Is it really a friendship or is it more than that? And so it says this, to give one example. It says Daria's crush on Trent was her trying to redirect her attraction to Jane onto a more socially acceptable target, but one who still resembles Jane. When Tom came along, Daria was understandably devastated and initially hostile towards him, but was ultimately drawn to him due to him being associated with her, in her mind, to Jane. All right. Daria never liked Tom. Her entire relationship with Tom was a way for her to punish herself, and Tom for her to betray Jane. And it goes on, this other fan theory goes on to say that all the inhabitants of Lawndale are immortals. The images that play over the credits actually did occur in the past. Doesn't explain the ones that are of animals or even inanimate objects, or the ones that obviously parody real historical figures or characters that are fictitious, even in Daria's universe. They took the leap. Does this mean that Daria and Jane have to go to high school and cope with the vain and dumb people for eternity? And then this is very interesting too with this fan theory. So, the final episode that ends with Daria is one of those things where, and then particularly also when she's talking to her aunt, the similarities is quite noticeable. But going back to the end of the final episode of Daria's reflecting back on her childhood and then the arguments that her father and her mom had. And so that also alludes to that. Is that actually an argument that they're having because of trying to cope and not telling the secret or hiding the secret that her mom is actually not her mom, that her aunt is her mom, and they're trying to readjust? Or is it a thing where it is a false memory and those weren't actually them fighting? It's actually her aunt who actually is her mom. Is it, this theory entails fighting with the dad or her dad, and all of that. What is all of this alluding to? So it goes on to say Amy inadvertently got pregnant, but decided that she wasn't ready to raise a child. So Helen and Jake, who were already married at the time offered to adopt the child. Goes on to say, Daria is the spitting image of Amy and a very similar personality also with that. They are even the only ones in the family to wear glasses, and the need for glasses is genetic. So this could mean that all of the time Quinn was telling the truth about Daria being her cousin. It also makes sense in the first episode when Daria overhears Quinn telling a guy that she's an only child and gets angry. She's PO'd that Quinn doesn't see her as a real sibling. This might also explain Daria's alienation from her parents and why her mother often pushes her instead of Quinn, and says she doesn't want to treat Amy's daughter better than her own. While it seems that Helen has a lot of rage towards Rita, maybe she doesn't have that level of frustration towards Amy because she takes some of it out on Daria. So there are plenty of people who are more alike like their aunts and uncles than their own parents. So genetics are a funny way of taking a look at that. Speaking of genetics, only Daria and Amy are shown to wear glasses, although Jake is implied to need them for reading, but is too stubborn to get them. So bad vision can be a genetic trait as well. Tom Sloan is not very popular at his school. So Tom Sloan is the English teacher, but he's also the self-esteem. The people who suffer from, which Jane is in, and Daria inadvertently is in too, with esteem issues, emotional behavioral problems too. Despite his belonging to a wealthy old family, I got that character mixed up. Tom Sloan is the guy who was dating Jane, and then Daria started dating him. So let's start over again. Tom Sloan is not very popular at his school. Despite his belonging to a wealthy old family, he drives an old car all the time, and his family has a bit of a reputation for not doing anything exciting. He is very intellectual and doesn't seem very interested in his own social class. When Daria tells him that a rumor is going around Lawndale that the two of them had sexual relations, Tom asks jokingly if they could get the rumor going at his school too. In one episode, his good friends blow him off. We learn very little about Tom's own school life, but it certainly looks like Tom wasn't a very popular guy on his own turf. All right, and it goes on to say, so it says Aeon Flux is a descendant of Daria, Jane, or perhaps both. No real reasons other than it would tie to the rest of the MTV animation verse. And she doesn't have a similar sarcastic tone voice, at least. Upchuck is Archie Andrews. Perhaps the alternate universe version or something. Or perhaps this is the real Archie, and Archie Comics is just his fantasy life. And Jake and John Arbuckle from Garfield. Considering Mad Dog opinions of cats, Jake would more likely be John Arbuckle from Garfield. If Jake is the original John, does that make him Helen? And Daria and Jane are Marcy and Peppermint Patty from Peanuts. That's quite interesting, mixing all these universes up as to explain the aspects how other cartoons that are in the realms of what Daria is addressing, if it's a possibility they have ties. All right, so the full name of Mystic Spiral is actually Mystic Spiral, but we're thinking of changing the name. This is why the introduction themselves, that way most of the time Mystic Spiral is just a form of the name. Mystic Spiral ended up getting that big break by opening for the Death Lock, I believe the pronunciation of that. And those of these shows on said tour will bring forth the metal clips. Fittingly, Daria and Jane will mock the carnage and senseless violence around them. Tiffany is actually Alan Rickman, or at least Alan Rickman playing Snap, hence the awkward pause. So Mac have played Tom's. Tiffany. So Tiffany, I think that's one of the teachers, but okay, that's quite interesting. So Mac is one of the football players. So Mac would have played Tom's role and been involved in the love triangle with Daria and Jane if the producers had found a stable voice for him and got to use him more like they wanted to. One of the main complaints about Tom was that he was brought in out of nowhere simply to act as a plot device to set up the love triangle story arc, and that it would have been better to use established characters. Out of all of the teenage boys and the regular cast before Tom's introduction, Mac would have fit the bill perfectly, especially in the books. So that his relationship with Jody is shaky. He at least is sympathetic towards the girls and closer to their intellectual level than any other reoccurring male character of their age. Daria takes place in the same universe as Becker. And Becker was a popular series in the 90s that starred Ted Danson, and Ted Danson in that show was a pessimistic doctor that lived in New York. There's an episode of Becker that's entitled Old Yeller, where he encounters this really sarcastic girl in glasses. So it says, everything about her, even her voice, reminds this person that wrote the TV trope of Daria. It goes on to say the aspect of Daria, another fan theory of Daria having autism. So most of the common theory is Asperger's syndrome, and on her actions, interests, and interactions with other characters. Okay, so it goes on to say, says, I think the inception is wrong, the wrong word to use. Skills and social interactions are very seldom, and it comes intuitively to this. But there's nothing that says all of this are always socially incept. It's just a means that we learn social interactions the way one would learn a foreign language intellectually. And yeah, that goes without saying with the whole aspect too, that was also prevalent to address those certain things, particularly in the 90s. We're talking about being antisocial, and then the whole aspect of how that interlaced in different music, and sort of the aspect with bands like Smashing Pumpkins and more bands like that, and then some, interlaced too with the aspect of grunge and things like that, making commentary about the aspect of how youth see themselves and the aspect of the Generation X, how they see their disposition in life. So, that could be a thing too with their addressing with Daria and her anti-socialism. Being antisocial, that is. And so this is a common trope too with the aspect of that the characters are dead. So it particularly says Daria and Jane are dead and they are in hell, where the devil is punishing them for being so ironic. So by forcing them to go along the house go over again, and that's, their plight. So ironically, it goes on to say, ironically, in 2011, Beavis and Butthead, in the Beavis and Butthead episode, Drones, Beavis believes Daria committed suicide. So if it wasn't for Butthead to mention she moved away by deleting herself like that, Beavis was right, or Daria is no longer there, passed on, and Londell is her hell. All right, so I am going to get into talk about the political aspects of Daria. And if you want to read further into these fan theories, it's a long list, so I will have that link provided for you. All right, here we go. Daria and politics. It goes on to say the political views of Daria, of the characters of Daria, is frequent, and the topics among fans. Because Daria Morgendorffer herself is so thoughtfully characterized as both cynical and sarcastic, and fully lives up to those labels. So it is hard to know whether to take her seriously when she offers her opinions. It is generally believed that she is like several of the show's main characters. Yeah, goes on to say, has a mild leaning towards the political left. Her parents have much stronger liberal leaning attitudes about politics, but even they have moderate views since their teenage hippie years. And they are prone to change their opinions in conversations with others to be agreeable. So, it says, in virtually every canon source available, Daria is outspoken in many aspects of late 1990s life in America. She reveals the middle class a way of life. It's the way of life and its value system. Mocks and challenges authority at every turn, and scorns her peers in every category, from their intellects to their moral code. Her verbal bars do not go unnoticed. Mr. O'Neill is the English teacher. And writes a letter to her parents and the Daria diaries to complain about her disrespectful and wandering remarks. And Andrew confronts both Daria and Jane with the consequences of their sarcasm and the mart of darkness. One of Daria's most present nemesis, Miss Lee, the principal, even gives Daria, Angela Lee that is, even gives Daria a special award for the latter graduation, and is it college yet, for dazzling academic achievement in the face of a near total chaos. The chaos of it all. And, her making note of that, the principal. So, it is noteworthy that most of those receiving Daria's barbs are not conservatives. Helen and Jake Morgendorffer, Mr. O'Neill, And of course, this source will be provided for you in this episode. And I'm going on the tones of how this person wrote this piece. So it is noteworthy that most of those receiving Daria's barbs are not conservative. Helen and Jake Morgendorffer, Mr. O'Neill, and many others are in fact political liberals who access Daria's mocks without end. She has, however, expressed mild respect for the ideas of the 1960s left wing, and that was them, this is dumb, and prize fighters. She also expressed contempt for part of the capitalist system and general and large corporations, specifically saying in an essay they were following the planet and cheating their workers just to keep their stock prices pumped. She was extremely put off to find the Wizard Foundation, though she was writing a spoof. She also showed distaste for Wizards' hiring and promotion policies, which disadvantaged women and minorities. The word, according to Daria essay, it is all so taxing. It has asked, how does it help the poor to give numerous tax breaks to the super rich while dating Tom Sloan? She was also repeatedly at odds with the privilege and assumption of the upper class, and also jumped to conclusions based on her own assumptions about Tom's class. Her specific views on political issues and parties are rarely stated. We don't know what else she thought about the Clintons, and she was horrified at the idea of Beavis and Butthead talking to them. The New Kid and the World, according to Daria, are rare exceptions. All right, so the New Kid, Daria gives two straight answers: that she's in favor of unmandated emissions control for developing nations, but thanks UN mandated, that is, but thanks that UN timetables are unrealistic. And she feels trade embargo are the effective ways of dealing with human rights violations. But the U.S. government always finds a loophole when it comes to major trading partners. And then lastly, it says, in another off-canon moment, the final essay of the world, according to Daria. Daria jokes that she'd appear on Becoming and My Dream Comes True as a transform to the aspect of the president of the Czech Republic. And this may mean she is genuine in favor of that. So the left-wing ruler, who was famous for his political fiction and essays, was the key figure in the aspects of communism. And then I believe the pronunciation is Helvet. But this source, of course, will be provided for you in this episode. So I want to end on this note. All right, so yes, of course, there is elements and examples in the times that we're living in. And let me say that again. In the times that we're living in, of people boldly addressing, making social commentary about things that are uncomfortable, and that should be noted. But it also should be noted, too, about the aspect of things that were addressed in the past might not be so favorable today. So that takes on another point that I'm going to end with. So, there was talks for Daria and for Jody to have a show. And I think it was supposed to be in either 2021 or something along the lines of that. So it's quite interesting that didn't get released and then of course they came out with a PR politely well perceived or well received answer by saying something but not really addressing the issue. So from my point of view, I think it was a whole thing where we're living in a time where we can't, which is unfortunate, and it's just a thing that we gotta realize and notice. And that's why and that's a good thing too, there's a lot of pushback against mainstream shows and then mainstream media, that you can't really say things honestly without getting backlash against it or getting criticized about it, and in fear of that, this aspect of cancel culture comes about. And so that changes the realms of reality of what can be said in the media, which it shouldn't be a thing. But it's noble when people just go against that and just state the obvious anyway, and then whatever repercussions come from that is whatever repercussions come from that. And so the aspect of this show not airing with Jody and Daria, I think it's a light to saying that we can't really be critical or honest with what these characters would say in this day and time or what have you, because we're not in that atmosphere to talk about things like this and without fear of being shut down. And that's quite radical because America is supposed to be the deeming mecca of the place where people from different points of views can come and share those things and then just hash them out with a hearty debate. And then, of course, that goes without saying, the emotional aspects of debating people, of course, that comes. But within that, with the realm of that, the aspect of speaking things out rationally, that goes without saying that that's not really a thing now. But there is hope in the near future. It's not all is lost, but it was more prevalent when Daria was newly on air, and the times in the 90s and the early 2000s, you could talk about these things still, and then there wouldn't be a whole lot of pushback. And so, adding on to the element of fan theories, it's also another way for people to address times of what they see, how they see these characters in the era of today, and also people who are of the original generation of Daria, giving pinpoints of what they think about the aspects of Daria and how that weighs in on the concept of how influential this show was in society. And then, of course, you get into the aspect of a show like this being influential because it goes into daring the questions about seeing things honestly from a youthful point of view about what people are facing. And then also interlacing the aspect of how the adults that live in that town, how they see things and their different political views interlaced into that, and how that sets up the structure of how they live in this town and how they think about certain things. And then how that influences their decision making about people and their lives, and then people and their work. So what do you all think about the aspect of Daria in society? I'd be very interested to know about that. So either email me, find me on Substack, find me on X, and of course make all the good comments on YouTube. And I appreciate the people that listen to me on YouTube. And, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, feel free to make comments. It's greatly appreciated. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye now.